Hello, welcome to the West Coast Biased. I'm Andrew Nemec, joined as always by Jason Suke and Nemec. How you feeling, man? How you living?
A little gravelly this morning, but we'll push through. So if it sounds like I've had about 1,000 Marlboro Ultralights, I apologize. So I don't know what it is. I woke up with a little going on.
A little scratchy, a little tickle.
A little scratchy, a little tickle, today, but we'll push through because we're doing this, and don't let anyone tell you that this is some sort of hard manual labor job. So I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, the weather's not good, and we're inside. A cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's okay.
Chilling. Yeah, wanted to go over the region's NFL draft prospects. So a lot of Oregon Ducks here. There's going to be some talk about the USC Trojans, some Washington talk, and then we got a listener question about kind of the state of the program, about Oregon State. It was kind of a what do you guys see going on so far? We haven't touched on it in a couple months. It doesn't surprise me that we would get a question about it. So I thought we would touch on that. But I do want to start with general thoughts on this draft. I think that it's an interesting one if you listen to experts about how many blues there are. And blue chips, for people who don't know, is a top 10 player. You project him as a top 10 player at his position in the NFL. Not a lot of blues and not a lot of certified blues in this draft, but maybe a lot of depth where you can go pretty far in and feel like you're getting pretty good starters.
Sure. I mean, there's always something to when you go into the draft, I always say take everything with a grain of salt because no one knows, right? This is all kinds of projections, but there's always there's position value, right? Caleb Downs might be the best player in this draft, but he's a safety, and safeties usually don't go picked in the top 10. So, how many prime positions are? I was listening to someone today, and they were talking about the Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell draft, right? When that was the debate, right? Do you get the protector for Joe Burrow, or do you get the receiver? And the Cincinnati Bengals went with Jamar Chase because they thought that there were better tackles available in the second round than there were receivers. So therein, something like that can come down to it. I mean, you have I think that was like the third or fourth pick. They were both very high draft picks. And it was the idea of, well, we like them both and both are prime positions, right? You need a receiver, you need a tackle. Well, we think we can get a tackle late in the draft. We don't like the receivers as much, so we'll take the receiver. So stuff like that plays a role. There's so much when you look at NFL draft boards. It's not just about, I think he's the best player, right? There's just more to it than goes to that. So yes, when you look at someone saying it's a deep draft in one position and not in the other, people can laugh at that and be like, well, there's stars in the draft, but that's not the way you can operate in the draft, right? You have to be able to go through and put your draft board up there and say, it's just a way more involved process, right? Like you said, you have your group A, your group B, your group C, and you see runs, right? That happens all the time where, if there's 4 elite tackles and by the time you're drafting, 3 of them are off the board, you may end up taking a tackle that you don't like as much as the defensive lineman, but you're like, hey, they're all gone. So it really does kind of stack up. But you're right. For everything I've heard from a groupthink standpoint is this isn't necessarily a loaded top prospect draft. And starting at quarterback, I think there's some years that Fernando Mendoza, who's going to be the number 1 overall pick, that he could have been the 3rd or 4th quarterback on the board. There may not be another quarterback taken in the first round. Ty Simpson maybe. And in a lot of years, Ty Simpson wouldn't even be a first-round pick. So but there's also a lot of edge rushers in this. It's deep, but maybe not there's like, as you said, there's no Nick Bosa, there's no Myles Garrett, but it feels like when you're looking at edge rusher, there's a bunch of them, but it may not be that true high-end guy. So yeah, all that.
It's gonna be fascinating because the edge group is really, really deep. It might be the deepest edge group we've seen in the last 6-7 years. Yeah. You can go mid-late second round and get productive, maybe not the high ceiling, high twitch that you get at the very top of the board, but you can get productive edge rushers, depth edge rushers in the second round, in the third round. That's usually kind of a dead spot because you're taking a flyer on a guy. So positions that are just premium are tackle and edge, where you have to pay the premium. And if they're good, they're really good. To get a good one, they're top 10. You look at, and Pro Bowl is a joke now, but you look at like an all-pro list, almost always at edge and tackle, those guys are coming from the top 10 picks. You can get good ones. You can get solid ones in the second round, but you're not getting that elite guy. Those are rarefied air. It takes a rare athlete, and that tends to show up in the draft profile. That's not necessarily the same at receiver, where we've seen really good receivers come out of the second round.
Puka Nacua and on and on.
Yeah, of course. So this year's draft's fascinating because there is so much depth at edge. There might not be that high twitch all the way down the board, but there are a lot of good ones. On the flip side, offensive tackle, not so much. So if you're picking and the Browns, by all accounts, it sounds like want to trade down from 6, which tells you exactly where Caleb Downs is viewed, because he could fall to them and they still apparently might not have interest. They're looking to move down, but just whoever is at 6, we'll just say it that way. Yeah. If you need help at left tackle and you need help at edge, you probably are going to take the Francis Malinois out of Miami type of player and then take your edge in the second, because whoever you get at 6, and maybe it's Ruben Bain, the gap then when you take the offensive tackle is brutal in the second round, because there's such a drop off this year.
Yeah, Spencer Fano is the other guy that you see up there. And look, I know he's a big body as an athlete, but having watched Utah play a bunch, I watched a lot of Big 12 football, unfortunately, BYU. That's another guy that I don't quite get. There's a bunch of those at the tackle position. Proctor out of Alabama. I don't love him.
I do not like Caden Proctor at all.
It's kind of one of those where I get why Proctor and Fano are being put in the first round, but I think some of that is we just love big bodies, right? The NFL loves big bodies, and Fano's a better athlete than Proctor. Proctor is just an enormous human being, whereas Fano's got a little more of an athletic side to him. But again, watching both of those guys play, I didn't love it. And yet those may be the second and third tackles, and Proctor may end up getting moved into the guard position if he fails a tackle. But I just don't love that those are the two. Those are two guys that are put pretty high up on that. That to me always scares me when I see the second and third ranked prospects on a draft board. Now, to be fair, it's not like I'm watching the all 22 right now of these guys, but having seen both of them play a bunch, that scares me. That those are the second and third ranked, or maybe second and fourth ranked tackles on people's boards. I think there's a big gap between 1 and 2, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the other thing to look for and to get an idea of how this board really breaks out, it is interesting to me that the two bona fides, or the guys that people say they're going to make it for sure, are Jeremiah Love, a running back out of Notre Dame, who's good, but he doesn't have the traditional hype of that elite. He's very good. I love him. He's a great football player. I liked him last year. He doesn't have the hype of that. This dude, oh my, he's an all-pro from day one kind of buzz that we got from an Ashton Genty, that we got from a Bijan Robinson. Yeah. Caleb Downs is very good. He's a safety. And then you look at the kind of top defensive prospects, because it is kind of defensive loaded up at the top. You look at the top prospects, David Bailey is uber twitched up, but he's 6'3", 250, and he's not the biggest cat. Like, he is not necessarily a guy who is going to come in and have no problem tossing elite big body left tackles out of his way. So there are some concerns there. Again, we're talking the top of the board. It's nitpicky. But generally, when you're talking about who's the number one edge rusher in the draft, it's a big, twitchy guy. When you're 6'3", 250, that's a little bit of a question. You're a little bit of a tweener, especially if you're all speed. And then you look at Ruben Bain. Ruben Bain might be the most compact top 10 pick at edge we've seen in a long time. He's not very big. And so when those guys are at the top of the board and they have questions, and I think they're both really good, that's not my point. My point is you could poke holes in their scouting reports. When even those guys are at the top 5 picks, that means your draft doesn't have a lot of no doubters. And so this is going to be an interesting draft. And I do think it's a draft that's going to get people fired. And we say that all the time in every draft, right? At the end of the day, if you fail in the draft, you're in trouble. But like Arvell Reese is either going to be a superstar or he's going to be a bust, and someone's going to take him in the top 10 picks, and that's going to define that GM. If Ruben Bain has such short arms that he, looks Will Campbell-y at times, on the flip side, obviously, in the NFL, that's going to get somebody in trouble. If you reach for Ty Simpson or Garrett Nussmeier in the first round because you desperately need a quarterback, and they prove to be the next Desmond Ridder, you're in trouble. So this is going to be a really interesting draft. And I do want to caution people in this type of draft, sometimes fit is really important. And so you'll see a guy and you'll look and everybody who's picking 21 or 23, or if you're Seattle, you're picking like 32 or whatever. Everybody wants to see that they pick and they look at Daniel Jeremiah and Dane Brugler's big board and they're like, awesome, we picked 23rd and we got the 11th ranked player, right? Like we got 10 spots of value. Sometimes that number 11 guy, it doesn't fit your scheme and you're getting what you need. And then there's a drop off, like we talked about earlier, where, hey, if I don't get this really good corner now at 22, even though he's rated 27 on Daniel Jeremiah big board, the next corner is 64. Yeah. So let's get the corner we need now and not worry about it. Sometimes that's good process, even if it's not sexy. And I do think this is a draft where that could come up for a few teams, especially later in the first round if they don't trade back. With all of that being said, let's dive into some of the regional and local prospects. We'll start with the Oregon Ducks, and we'll start with the splashiest name, although may not be the highest player taken for the Oregon Ducks, as it turns out, because there's a player that is rising very, 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 very quickly. Yeah. Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end for Oregon. This is a guy that everybody stamped early as a potential first-round pick. Within, it felt like 2 weeks of the football season, everyone was on board. He leapt over a guy. He had some insane blocks. He had some big-time catches, big-time plays, showed off his athleticism. Everyone, yep, that's the guy. To his credit, he has held the number one tight end spot without a doubt in this draft for now 6 or 7 months.
Yeah,
that's pretty rare. That doesn't happen a lot at any position where, okay, you're the number one guy. No one creeps up on you. No one pushes you. And he gets a lot of credit for that. It's going to be fascinating where people see him in the pecking order. What do you make of Kenyon Sadiq? I certainly have my thoughts.
Well, I know you do. And so I'll let you go here in a minute. I think part of this is there's really not another one, right? He'll be the only tight end taken in the first round. I do think he goes later than what people think. I think he's a guy that, how do I say this? The look of him might be slightly better than the player that he is. He looks the part, right? He goes out there, and I call him bus guys. You know, whenever you're in high school football and you travel, you always want that guy to get off the bus first, right? Like you want the other team to see that. And he's always got like a half belly shirt on, and he walks off the bus carrying his shoulder pads, and you want everyone to go, Jesus, like what? Like who's coming here? He's that guy. But in terms of NFL, there's very few bus guys. Like Kenyon Sadiq is a man, but he's not going to overpower people in the NFL. You know, he's 6'3" and 245.
He's undersized.
Yeah, he's not your traditional, 6'5", 260-pound guy. He's a very willing blocker. He'll put his nose in there. But as the season went on, and he got beat up a little bit, he got chipped up. The blocking kind of fell off. So is that a product of he was playing better teams because they were kind of playing, Tallahassee JUCO at the beginning of the year versus how much he just was beat up? I don't know, but the blocking certainly wasn't the same at the end of the year. Whereas the pass catching, I think, got better as the year went along. So, it's like he is the number one tight end. But how much of that is, I'll tell you what, if he was in last year's draft, he wouldn't have been the number one tight end.
Correct.
Right. So that's all I'm saying with Sadiq. And I know sometimes Oregon fan gets all pissy at people that dare question their guys. But in a draft, if this was Brock Bowers, if this is Tyler Warren, maybe if this is even Colston Loveland, Kyle Pitts, and, even Pitts was like, can't miss. Well, he kind of missed. And now he had a nice year and, may get the franchise tag. So he is a very good tight end prospect. He is a first-round tight end, and this year he will be the first tight end taken, no question. I think that's closer into the 20s than it is into the early teens, as some people thought, and I think he's got a chance to be a nice NFL player. I think his best comp, maybe if you're going to say the true high end, is a George Kittle type, who, if you want to say like everything goes well, and he becomes George Kittle. But I'm not certain. I don't think he is a slam dunk prospect, but I think he'll go to the combine and I think he'll blow people away in the underwear Olympics because he looks like an absolute physical freak. I mean, he looks the part. And I think sometimes we get fooled with our eyes about what that, a player that looks like that. We love that. We love the guy that's got the six pack, and we love the guy that's just looks athletic and is wearing the skin tight uniform. And that's not always, again, Tyler Warren doesn't look like that. And Tyler Warren had one of the best rookie years we've seen from a tight end in a long, long time. So, you know, that's kind of where I land on Sadiq. I like him. I don't love him. Nor do I think he is an absolute slam dunk, but he will be the first tight end taken, and it won't be a reach. You know, whether that's Kansas City or whoever ends up taking him, and he'll be one of those guys you talked about fit. I think he needs to go to the right place. I think he needs to go to a place that's going to use him properly. And if he does, he'll be a really nice player. Do I think that he will ever be an all-pro tight end in the NFL? To me, first off, that's such a high barrier.
It's an insanely high barrier, especially now. There are a lot of good ones.
There's a lot of good tight ends. I mean, and so when people say, well, he's got to be an all-pro, I'm like, are you kidding me? Look how many really good tight ends have never been an all-pro tight end, because that's not Pro Bowl, right? I'm talking all-pro, best tight end in the league.
Right.
I personally don't think that that's an all-pro tight end. Can he make a Pro Bowl and be a good productive player for 10 plus years? Yeah, in the right system. So that's kind of my overall view. Like him, don't love him the way some in the draft process leading up to this. And I'm also interested to see what happens, because throughout the beginning of the year, when you get a player like this that has all the hype that comes into it, like, and he did, right? People have been talking about him since day one. Like, oh, and by the way, he only had one real year of popping. And there's another one, right? Is he a bit of a late bloomer? This is the 1 year being that super productive guy. And all year people are like, oh my God, look at him, look at him, look at him, look at him. You put up the highlight reel, and then you kind of go back and you look at the rest of it and you're like, oh, well, it's good. So I'm interested to see where the draft process, will he be a riser where people love him, or will eventually people kind of look at everything and do they nitpick him a little bit? And so that's where I said, do you fall in love with all the metrics, and does he rise up into the 12 spot, 11, 12, or do we nitpick him a little bit and he goes 22? If you put a gun to my head, I think he gets nitpicked, and I think he falls into the 20s. And maybe the truth is he just sits there in the 17 range and goes somewhere in the middle.
So there's a lot to unpack here for me. Sadiq is one of those loaded prospects for me.
Yeah, you've been talking about this for a while, that it's there's a lot of meat on that bone for you.
Yeah. So I picked him as my breakout player for Oregon 2 years ago. Even knowing the depth, I'd heard some things. I knew him from high school. That
he sat behind really good tight ends, by the way. You know, Ferguson was
that he was going to be a monster. And I had heard that even with Ferguson and Herbert there, that he was forcing the issue. As good as those guys were, remember, Terrence Ferguson was a day 2 NFL draft pick, and Sadiq still pushed through and took some reps. Herbert was a legacy kid who was really knowledgeable, who really knew the playbook and knew how to do a lot of different things. See goal line plays when they went for 2 a lot. He was reliable in those spots. Patrick Herbert was. So for Sadiq to break through that was really impressive. I get criticized. The number one criticism with draft stuff for me is people who pay attention, and I appreciate that, is that I'm sometimes wishy-washy with this kind of kid. I want to be clear. There's a huge difference between me saying, hey, this third stringer is going to end up being a star, and then once they become that star, me saying, I think he's a late first or early second rounder because there are some issues. That's not me changing my mind. That's me saying, this dude was a third string dude who I still think is going to be a first or second round pick. Now that we're talking about him at that level, here are his issues and here are his warts and bugaboos. That's not changing the narrative. So I want to be clear, because Sadiq was my guy, and now I'm almost the other way on it. I said all year that I think Sadiq has inconsistent hands. I don't think he's a natural catcher of the football. I don't think he naturally catches the ball away from frame very well. To me, he is kind of that, like, almost like literally, and he looks like it too, almost that Tarzan, like run. Okay, stop. Like he's thinking about it. Catch the ball. Okay, caught the ball. Now go be Tarzan. You know, it's not a natural fluid, where I thought Colson Loveland was very fluid. If you're putting him in last year's draft, I would have had him behind Colson Loveland. Colson Loveland's 6'6", 240 pounds. I don't think he's anywhere near as willing a blocker, but he's big. So he is a mismatch problem, and he's a very fluid pass catcher, very natural hands, really good. Whereas Sadiq, to me, feels clunky. So I like Sadiq. I want to be clear. I still have a late first round grade on Kenyon Sadiq, because in the right system, he is a matchup nightmare. You could put him in the slot. You could put him outside at times, especially, we'll watch that 40, but you could even put him outside with some of the crazy stuff Shanahan does and move him. I mean, you can do all kinds of stuff with a body and an athlete like Kenyon Sadiq. The problem is, if you're grading him, I think he's a 10 of 10 in terms of get off the bus athlete. And I think his skill set is more like 7.5 of 10. I don't think he's just this elite fluid route runner, great hands. To me, none of that's there on tape. The blocking fell off as he got banged up. Guess what? He's undersized.
Yeah.
So if he gets banged up in college and the blocking falls off, the blocking's going to fall off in the NFL because it's way more physical.
And it's 17 weeks, by the way.
So that's really concerning for me. That's really concerning for me. That doesn't mean he's going to be bad. He could go to the Niners, and I'm a Niner fan, and he's a lot like an aging George Kittle, and he can even do some use check stuff. And use check's now an over 30 fullback whose days are numbered. He could go into that role and be a monster. And I could still say, gosh, I wish he, was a little bit more natural pass catcher. So I like Sadiq a lot. Those things worry me. The other thing I want to talk about with Sadiq, because it's really going to matter come combine time. People think all metrics, all combine times are created equal. That is not true at all. It's extremely important that people understand that if you are undersized, you are expected to run a much faster 40. Yeah. You are expected to run a much faster shuttle. This came up with Tez Johnson last year, who I liked, but said that 40 is going to kill him as a draft prospect. He's going to fall in the draft because of it. And people said, well, his shuttle was really good because it was like a top 20%, top 10% shuttle. It was a really good shuttle time. And my point was, and the counter and NFL people said, and not from me, I heard it on podcasts, that because he was so small, he was in the 0th 1 percentile in height weight combined. He had to be a top 5 percentile 40 guy and shuttle guy to match that, where you go, okay, now he's kind of even. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like there's a spectrum to hit like 50% ish.
Sure.
And if you're bigger, you can run a 4.65, and that's as a tight end, and that's not an issue. Yeah. If you're 6'3", 250, you need to be a 4.45 guy. Yeah. You need to be a 4.48 guy. If you run a 4.54, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. That's not a terrible time, but it's not standout-ish. Yeah. And if another dude who's 2 inches and 50 pounds heavier than you, or 2 inches, 30 pounds heavier than you, runs a 10th slower, it's possible teams go, yeah, but he can do more for us. Yeah. So it's really important to pay attention to height, weight, benchmark combined. There are sites that do this really well. You get like the spiderweb chart.
Yeah.
And you want to fill out as much of that as you can. Sadiq's already going to dip down on the size. Yeah. He's not going to fill out the spiderweb chart all the way, because that size is going to dip down. So because of that, he has to be extreme in the other areas. I think he can do it. I don't think there's any doubt, but he has to do it, or else he's going to slip. And I think that's really important for people to understand. I like Sadiq. In the right system, I think he succeeds. If you just make him a traditional tight end, I think that's a wasted pick. Yeah. And I don't mean like a total bust. I just mean you're not getting the value of what he can be. You need to be creative with him. You need to be versatile with him. You need him to be able to do a lot of different things. And if you're not an offense that can take advantage of that, he's going to leave a lot of meat on the bone in terms of what he can do for you that you're not taking advantage of. So,
well, and that's where I said, like, it's, to me, he's not the same size player, but so many teams now, if he can be a good inline blocker, if that can translate, I mean, that's where George Kittle to me was always a better tight end than Travis Kelce, is that he was better in the run game. And San Francisco and what they do can be so multiple. San Francisco, for all those years when they were killing it with Juszczyk and Kittle, you could be running, basically 12 or 13 personnel, and then you shift out and now you're running 4 wide. And the ability to play in the slot or play outside, and the ability to be an inline blocker and being willing, that's where I think if you're going to get the best out of Kenyon Sadiq, that's where he needs to be. But then that lies the question, is he athletic enough and fluid enough to play on the outside, and he's physical enough to play in the inline? I don't know. And at 245, and I'll see what he weighs at the combine. And this may be the other one that people will push back, and just from the eye test, but not all 245s are created equal. Kenyon Sadiq is not naturally 245.
How about this? This is a perfect example. Sam Laporta is listed 6'3", 245.
Yes.
That's the same size. Sam Laporta and Kenyon Sadiq are not the same 6'3", 245.
So and I was one of these guys that as an old lineman, and let's say I was like 315 or 310, right? I'm not naturally 310 pounds, right? I made myself, and probably not in the best ways as fat ass, but like I made myself 300 pounds because I just ate a lot, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm like, and then there would be other guys that I played with that just were walking around, that they were probably walking around at 320 and they had to slim down to 310. Well, guess which one of those is going to be a more durable, better NFL player, all things being equal? The guy that's just naturally walking around, right? Like I have small wrists, I have small ankles. I'm not like this huge framed guy. I'm 6'3", and I'm not this enormous like frame. And that's when I look at guys sometimes that look like bodybuilder types. And again, we're being so nitpicky here. He's the most interesting Oregon prospect, right?
We both like Sadiq.
But like him a lot.
Yeah.
But it's like this idea that we look at these guys that look jacked and look like bodybuilders, and sometimes we say that's the ideal NFL body. And that may be a guy that has gotten the very max out of that body. There is 245 pounds stacked on that thing because of protein shakes and eating and ridiculous training. And he's kind of got this whole big muscle bound thing. And a lot of times that's the guy that has a hard time staying healthy. That's the guy that just he's pushing his body to the max. Whereas someone like you mentioned, Laporta, I think Kittle's one of these guys, because Kittle's like 6'4", and I think they list him at 250. Yep. But he's not. It's a natural 250. Right. If he put every bit of that protein and just like this, like Kittle could probably walk around at 270. Right. He just has this frame that can carry it. He carries a very easy 250 or 255. Sadiq carries a very heavy 245. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's Sadiq. Honestly, I think that body probably is closer to 220 than it is 245.
225 is what I thought he'd be. I thought he'd be a really undersized dude at 225.
But he's made himself bigger. You can see this a lot if you ever watch boxing, if you ever watch a UFC, right? This is a great example of it. So you get fighters, let's say we're watching a guy that's fighting at 170 or 175. And there's a guy that, because they both weigh in the night before the fight. You may have had a guy 48 hours earlier that, or let's say maybe a week earlier, dude, that guy was 215 pounds.
Right.
And in the span of, a week or two, that guy got down to 175. And when they go into the ring or they go into the cage, he may have made the 175 weight. He's walking in at 205. And the other guy, the other guy's 170 pounds. That's what he weighs. Right. And maybe he walked around at 180 and got down to 170 or 175. And you watch him when you walk into the cage and you're like, Jesus, like one guy is significantly bigger. And you're like,
they weighed the exact same 48 hours ago or whatever.
You're like, how is that? And then you see the guy a year later and he's fighting in a weight class up. And that's kind of what I think about Sadiq is he has made himself an NFL tight end size. But I think if we're being honest, he probably, his body probably doesn't want to be 245 or maybe at the combine, he bulk up. He may be 250 pounds at the combine. Remember, the combine's a test.
No. Yeah, but athleticism matters more than size. Like
I know.
He's already dinged for size, right? They know he's not big. So if he goes in and is like, I'm 7 pounds heavier, but it takes a 10th off his 40 and he's slower.
I'll be interested to see. All I know is a lot of times guys go into the combine and they weigh more, they weigh less. And a lot of that is your agent will tell you. Remember, these guys have had a long time now to sit there and be like, this is what we need to go at the combine. And so you do get guys that go in and they will, like, hey, I need to be leaner and faster. I need to be bigger. It's the job interview. And so how he does at the job interview, he will be a very interesting combine. And I'm assuming he does everything in the combine, fingers crossed. I would think. So he will be and which is why we spent, 20 minutes talking about him. He will be by far the most interesting Oregon prospect at the combine, rise, fall, and all that.
Just to highlight how different you can be at 6'3", 245. I looked it up while we were talking. 6'3", between guys who are 6'3" and between 240 and 250 in the NFL, and they're wildly different players. Sam Laporta, Detroit Lions receiver. Tight end. Evan Ingram, who's almost slot receiver, big jumbo slot at times. Yeah. He doesn't block. Evan Ingram, 6'3", 240, and Jonnu Smith, 6'3", 248. Those are three very different tight ends with different bodies. Yep. It'll be interesting to see
which one, where he goes.
This prospect's rising more than maybe any other prospect in the last few weeks. Nothing's happened except that the Seahawks won a Super Bowl with DBs who can cover and tackle and are willing tacklers. And so because of that, it seems in a copycat league, Dillon Thieneman's stock seems to be skyrocketing. And you mentioned this on last week's show, that Thieneman was one of those guys, and it's not the jumbo slot. It's not that same thing, or jumbo nickel, big nickel, whatever. But it's kind of that same principle, a very versatile cover guy who's a willing tackler. And if you can play nickel and aren't afraid that you're going to get killed in the run because you trust that extra DB to be a tackler, Dillon Thieneman, he's going to have value. Here we are. Bing, bing, bing. It took 6 days for you to look really, really right here. Dillon Thieneman's stock is skyrocketing, and there's talk about him being a top 20 pick, which I think might surprise Oregon fan who thought because he had 2 picks on the year that he had a quiet year. He was their best actual player on tape last year, even if people don't recognize it.
Well, so Oregon ran kind of what Ohio State was running with Caleb Downs a little bit. They were running that 3 safety look, right? Big nickel. We've seen a lot of teams now, Seattle, with Witherspoon and with Emmanuel doing the
Nick Emmanuel.
Yeah, I always butcher that name.
I know. It's one of mine too sometimes.
Yeah. I even paused for a little bit. I was like, wait, how? Yeah. Emmanuel.
Yeah.
God bless America. I can't. The names get me every time. But yeah, running the system now with nickel. I mean, you get a lot of these teams now that are playing nickel or dime even at all times, and people want to be versatile. Where it's hard to find interior linebackers, right? And so, especially 3 down ones, so they're just finding like, okay, we're just going to play 2 of them, and we're going to leave them on the field, and we're just going to hide them in pass coverage because we're going to play with 5 and 6 DBs. And Thieneman was a really nice piece for Oregon. And when they played him in their nickel, at times he played in the deep half. At times he'd play in the slot. A lot of times he lined up as their third linebacker and would come down, and he was a willing tackler. I think some people wished he was a little bigger. I think he's a little over 200 pounds, so he's not, necessarily the heat-seeking missile that you would see at 215, plus pounds out there. But that dude, when you watch him, he will come and stick his nose down. He's not afraid to come in and tackle. And he's athletic enough where, he can play in the slot. I don't know if he can cover every slot receiver. Besides, Cooper DeJean does a nice job playing in the slot. He's not necessarily an elite outside corner, but he does a nice job in the slot. And so I think Thieneman's a guy that if he goes into the combine and shows fluid hips that he can turn and run, and shows a good 40 time that he can run and play in the slot, and certainly play in zone schemes where he can be a back half coverage. He is not a liability back there at all. And we do know that he is a willing tackler to come up. I really like him. I've liked him all the time at Oregon. And this doesn't surprise me at all that he is a riser. And from a position standpoint, I think it would shock me if he went higher than Sadiq, but I would not think that this is, if he ends up going 19 or 20 and Sadiq ends up going 23, in no way am I going to be surprised at this. So
what
I
a
think
travesty. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think this is the one where, again, Sadiq looks the part and has the press clippings behind him. And Thieneman's a guy that you didn't hear much about and you didn't think much about. And when you look at him in uniform, again, he's not a guy that's like, oh my God. But every time I watched Oregon play, 31 was there. Yep. And he was just making plays, and he's a productive guy. And he did it at Purdue, for God's sakes. Yep. Go back and look at those like to be a standout on Purdue's defense, dude, that's saying something, because Purdue sucks. And yet, and that all that guy does is make plays. So, I am a fan. I don't know, again, elite, who's to say? But there is a place in the NFL, and I do believe he will be a first-round pick. I think he is by far the most slept-on Oregon player in this class.
Yep, I agree with all that. We spent so much time on Sadiq. I don't want to take a ton of time on Thieneman. He's proven he's great in coverage, and that's a big thing from his time at Purdue. He had a bunch of interceptions. This year, Oregon asked him to be more downhill in the box. Yep. He's shown he can do both. And the ability to do both is coveted right now in the NFL. So yes, testing will matter, especially let's call it what it is. If you're a white DB, combine testing matters. You've got to prove it. I have him as safety 3 in this class, and I really like him. Like, that's not a shot at him. Caleb Downs is 1. Emmanuel Warren out of Toledo, I think, is a monster. I did one Niner mock draft where I took it pretty seriously, really dove into it and did it. And I took McNeil Warren at 27 and was thrilled. You want to talk about the big nickel guy, 6'2", 202, thumps, can cover, and he's now projected. He's Daniel Jeremiah's number 13 player. So adios to that. This is now the second time in 5 years that I've fallen in love with a Toledo DB and been like, this is the pick for the Niners
Mitchell.
In January or February. And I'm like, I love this for the Niners. And then by the time the draft rolls around, there's no shot whatsoever. So really good safety class. And I bring that up because it is tough to project 3 safeties going in the first round. It's just not a position that tends to do that. Maybe this is a lighter draft where that happens. And it certainly looks like it will at this point, but it does tell you a lot about the draft that there could be 3 safeties taken in the
top. And it might tell you about the NFL, and that the NFL NFL is a copycat league. And I'm telling you, look around. People have already playing this Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter, these too high shell looks. They're Brian Flores. Like, this is becoming the rage. And what is the solution to that? It's matchups, right? And the offense is trying to counter that. And when you can play your nickel, Kyle Shanahan said this before the Super Bowl. He said, if you cannot run the ball on the Seahawks and run them out of their nickel, you are in trouble. And so I do think that safety has traditionally been it's not a position of need, right? You don't see safeties go high. It's kind of viewed as an afterthought. And I think that's going to change. Linebacker is going to be an afterthought. Inside linebackers, people don't give two flying, what's about them. But I just think safety, it's always been corner. And I get it. You can never have enough corners. I just think safeties are guys that can play in the slot. I brought up Cooper DeJean, right? Cooper DeJean was a corner, and he plays in the slot. I mean, he plays the nickel, and he was an all-pro right there for Philadelphia. But he's not a true outside corner. No. In fact, when he does play out there, he struggles a lot. But the position that they play him, this is going to become, I think, I don't know, but I think over the next couple of years, what Thieneman can play in the NFL, I think, is going to become more of a position of value. And maybe we see that reflected in this year's draft, where we do see 3 safeties. I don't know about that Toledo kid. Again, I haven't seen him, but I have seen a lot of the people, like most boards now have him climbing up and being a not just a first round pick, but a high first round pick.
Yep.
And so I'll look at him as we go on, and there's more stuff that's about him. But yeah, if we get 3 safeties that are taken in the top, let's say 20, 21, I do think that that's indicative, one, of not an elite class, because I don't think there'll be a lot of offensive linemen taken, tackles, not a lot of quarterbacks. But some of that I do think is a lack of those positions. But I do think that this is going to become more of a position of need and want, as the NFL looks at this and says, well, I want one of those.
Sure.
Seems to work for these guys. I would like one.
So for people who don't know, just very, very, very quickly, 4-3 defense is 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and then you've got your 4 DBs. A 3-4 is another traditional look with 3 down linemen, 4 linebackers, and your 4 DBs. Nickel literally just means a defense where you add a 5th defensive back. That's why it's called nickel, because you now have a 5th DB. And people are playing with what that body type is. You can look it up and have people say, well, it's 3 corners and 2 safeties. Sometimes it can now be kind of 3 safeties, and that safety can be a bigger safety. You can utilize that nickel to be whatever you want to strengthen or embolden and move them around. So if you can stay in nickel and stop the run when you've got 5 DBs on the field, so again, in the box, technically, not technically, but in the box, it looks like you have 1 less body based on the fact, again, a DB instead of a down lineman or a linebacker. If you can still stop the run doing that, again, way oversimplifying things, it means you're really, really athletic and really, really good. I do wonder if Sadiq also helps in this way. As teams go to nickel, maybe that slight dip in size doesn't matter as much, and he's such a matchup nightmare that against teams that run a lot of that, he's actually an asset. So you look at both Sadiq and Thieneman, I do think the modern changes in football could end up actually being good for both of them, depending on how things go at the combine.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Pregnon, more of a gap scheme interior offensive lineman. That's as far as I'm going to get into with this, because you know infinitely more and you run circles around me when it comes to linemen. Looks like a day 2-ish guy, maybe round 1, but probably more day 2.
Yeah, well, he's an interior guy, and so guards, guards. We talked about position value, if you will, and guard is not a position value, although it's changing a little bit. I do think that more teams, it used to be find me a left tackle, right? And everything else, like it was the left tackle and the end all to be all. And that's starting to change a little bit. I mean, Gray Zabel, when you look at what Gray Zabel meant to the Seattle Seahawks, I mean, I understand that you still need tackles in the league, but I mean, you loved Gray Zabel. What did Gray Zabel mean to the Seahawks? I mean, he was
their interior entirely, even with below average center and the worst right guard in football.
Yes.
He solved 3 positions for him, essentially.
Right?
I mean, he made 3 positions manageable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, do I think that Pregnon is necessarily one of those guys? No, but he's a huge interior body that is not going to get blown back. I think he is a very safe pick for someone. And I think in today's world of the NFL, I think the idea is we're going to pay 2 or 3 linemen, right? And then we can get by with, look at Seattle, right? You have 2 tackles that you like. You have an elite left guard now. The center, and the right guard is terrible, right? And I think that Pregnon has a chance to be one of the 3 linemen that you play. I do not think he will be the terrible guy. I don't know if he will ever. He's not Quentin Nelson. Okay. He's not, he's not a Linderbaum there in the middle where you're going to be like, okay, this is the anchor of our offensive line. But there is a place, because he is an enormous human being. I think at sometimes he plays with maybe a little bit too of a wider base, and I think you can get across his face a little bit. I think against Indiana he struggled a little bit in some of that. I think some of the slants and twists, I think at times he can be a little wide and kind of heavy-footed and doesn't necessarily move the way that you would like an elite guy to make. But he's also 6'5", 6'6", and he's probably going to weigh 325, and he's just a mauler. So he's a guy that you're not going to get blown back. He is a guy that is athletic enough. He can be a bit of a dancing bear to get to the second level. I just really like him. He's a really solid player. I thought there were times this year at Oregon where he was their best offensive player. I really believe that. When you go back and look, I thought he came into the season with Isaiah World being and Poncho, and then even Harkey, I thought had some moments early. I think he really fell off, but I just watched Pregnon all year, and I thought he was a really, really just solid player, and he's played a lot of football, right? He was good because he went from like Wyoming, and he was like an unranked guy, and he was at USC. I thought he was USC's best lineman, and I thought he was Oregon's best lineman. So he's just a guy that if I end up taking him in the second round, because I don't think he's going to be the athlete that everyone's going to fall in love with to rise him up into the first round pick as a guard. But I think if you've got a middle of the round second pick, like if you're picking it at 40, whatever, and you're just looking along your offensive line, they just went for like Seattle, right? For instance. And I don't know, you'd have to look and see what Seattle's needs are across and, what they do with running back. And are they bringing back Kenneth Walker? Sure. But here's one, like if it was available in the late second round and Seattle's sitting there, no offense to Nick Bedford, who's Seattle's right guard. I swear to God, he's the worst guard in football.
Anthony Bradford, excuse me, not Nick Bradford. Anthony Bradford is so bad. Like
it's
comically bad.
It's comically bad. It's kind of shocking that they won a Super Bowl with him playing.
I seriously think he might be the worst offensive lineman to win, to start and win a Super Bowl in the last decade. He's horrible.
Yeah, it's just not good. Mm-hmm. So I think that you know, there's a guy, whether that's in the second or third round, and again, maybe he falls a little bit. Again, I don't know if his athleticism people are going to fall in love with. Again, we'll see what happens at the combine. Where does he run? What does he do in the drills? I think his footwork is a little sloppy. Mm-hmm. Love the upper body, love the hands. I don't love the feet. See, which is why he's a guard, not a tackle. But
here's the thing, though. So Seattle runs a lot of zone scheme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and Pregnon is to me, a gap guy, where once you get him in space and once you get him moving, again, elephants on parade, as you like to say, that's where he dips down a half a grade to a full grade for me. So I want him to go to a gap scheme team. Your point is well made. A team that needs a guard that can elevate things significantly with just a guard would be thrilled to have him. I just don't know about the fit in Seattle.
That's a very good point. I'm just kind of, I was just thinking of a team off the top of my head that was guard like a guard needy, but you're right. He needs to go to a place where he can be big, physical, and move people out of the way. I mentioned, if you go back and watch the Indiana tape, I thought two of his worst games were Indiana, and they don't play really big defensive linemen. They play small stunting guys. And I love him in the run game. And I thought at times he got beat across his face a lot, and he doesn't necessarily have maybe the best recovery against some of that. So you are right in that Seattle probably wouldn't be the best fit. I was just thinking of a team that doesn't have a lot of necessarily pressing needs. He's a guy that I do think can go to a gap duo power scheme where you just need a 325-pound mauler. Throw him in at right guard, and he's never going to be, like I said, he's not the best guard in the world, but I think he can play in this league a long time. I mentioned guys that naturally, I talk about like inflated guys and guys that are just naturally big. I love naturally big guys along my interior offensive linemen. I love them. I can inflate a tackle. Lane Johnson's an inflated tackle, and he might be the best right tackle in the history of the NFL, right? I can inflate guys on the outside because I'll you give me a tight end that's 6'6", 6'7", that's probably naturally 260 pounds. I'll bulk him up to 305. And I'll make him a Downton Bear on my outside. You know what I want out of my guards? I want big sons of bitches. Yep. Give me that's why these kids, Iowa, Wisconsin, right, North Dakota. Give me that kid. Give me the kid that's just, when he was in the 8th grade, you were like, ew. I want the kid that drove to middle school, right? That has a full beard, and that's what this is. This is a big. Just have you ever stood by this guy? Have you ever stood by Pregnon? Dude, he is like, he makes I feel inadequate when like his arms and his hands and everything, and I think he's a guy that would be very durable. So I like him. I very much like him. He's a guy that if you tell me 10 years from now that he's still playing in the NFL, I bet that's about right. Do I think he will be great? No, but the second and third round isn't necessarily about being great. It's about finding guys that fit your scheme, as you said, not Seattle, but finding guys that fit your scheme and finding guys that you can rely upon. No, it was a great point. I just was off the top of my head because I don't know why in the back of my mind I always just I hate Bradford.
Well, if they can replace him, I thought of it too, and then I was like, it's not the right fit. I've got the right fit for you. I've got the team. I've got the pick. Yeah. What if the Chargers see him sitting there at 55? Yes. They run a gap scheme. They've got Slater and Alt, but their interior is crap. It's not the same as getting Gray Zabel in terms of he can solidify 3 positions, but he can solidify your interior, especially with Bozeman announcing his retirement. You've now got your 3.
There you go.
Your stud tackles, and you've got your left guard of the future in Pregnon that's durable, that's going to play for a decade, and you feel really good about your protection in front of Herbert. Isn't
much better?
Pregnon at 55? Boom.
Yes. Much better pick. And maybe he even falls. Maybe he's a guy that falls and he ends up in the 3rd round, and then you're licking your chops. Like if he's available and I'm a gap duo scheme team in the 3rd round and I can get him in the 3rd round, love it. Love the value of it. And you look at a lot of starters in the NFL, like quality guys, it's where they, especially interior linemen. Yes. This is where you build your offensive line. Yes, every now and then you get a Zabel, but and your tackles usually come in the 1st round, but a lot of your centers and guards that you're not going to end up paying $15 million a year to, right? They're just the kind of the solid pieces of your team. This is where you build them. This is where you find guys like in the late 2nd and 3rd round. You find these guys.
Patriots build, right? Will Campbell in your top 10 pick, you get your tackle. It didn't work out. He got hurt.
Didn't work out.
But then your interior guys, Jared Wilson, who you got in the 3rd, who started from day
away.
So
yes.
That's kind of how you build it, is the outside, further away from the ball, more premium, more inside. You can kind of wait later in the draft. Yeah. We've got 2 guys that I don't know what to do with next. And for very different reasons. One is wide receiver Malik Benson. The other is Isaiah World. Malik Benson is the prototype of the player I can't project. I don't know what to do with that guy. Dudes who were, here's the things, and their pluses and minuses. Plus, elite recruit, generally elite athleticism. That's on the plus side. On the bad side, late bloomer, especially at receiver. There's even algorithms that show the earlier you break out in college, the more likely it is that your athleticism and your star power will transcend and go to the NFL. So if you're a late blooming receiver, the hit rate on those guys is low. Benson, late bloomer, right? On the good side, special teams value, hugely valuable in the NFL. That's the plus side. On the bad side, multiple transfer stops, multiple different offenses, couldn't figure it out. Even at Oregon, struggled to figure it out. Then they needed him, and he was a top 10 receiver in the league in college football for like a month, and then kind of came back down to earth. I have no idea what to do with that profile. None. Late bloomer, elite recruit, elite speed, special teams. I think someone's going to fall in love with him in the 4th or 5th round and say he'll be our return man and our 4th receiver who stretches the field. I just don't know if I would be that team, but I have no idea what to do with a Malik Benson because there's too many things on either end that are red flag or green flags for me.
Yeah, and he's one of those, he's kind of a new age guy in that he bounced around so much, right? He started at some community college, right? And then he ended up at Alabama, and then Alabama to Florida State, and then Florida State to Oregon. He gets to Oregon, and he's a scout team guy. And then because of all the injuries, dude, Malik Benson, though, without Malik Benson, Oregon may not be in the college football playoff. Like when they had all their injuries, he was awesome. And, they say he's going to go, they say he's going to be a combine guy. Like he's, 6'1", whatever, 215 pounds or whatever.
Oh, he's going to run like a 4.42.
Dude, they're saying in the combine, he is going to blow some doors off. And the fact that, and we know the big return, right? Obviously it was another one without that, Oregon's in trouble. The splitting the defense against Washington to kind of break that game open. So I think there's going to be a thing where people look at him and be like, hey man, is this guy a gamer that just never was able to be in a place long enough to really kind of set his feet and become the guy? And that's why I say he's kind of a new age guy. That this may be more of a common thing, that when you bounce around so much and you have a hard time just kind of ever really establishing yourself, but you see flashes of it. Again, not a guy that's going to go super high, but he will be a player. I'm so with you. Someone's going to fall in love with him. This will be one of those, and you're already seeing him pop up on some, sleeper boards.
Oh, they're doing the whole thing with him. There's so many different blogs that are like, "Hey, my 5th round sleeper is Malik Benson."
Malik Benson. He'll be one of those guys. He will be. There is a place for Malik Benson on Sundays. He did that back half of the season when. This is going to sound really terrible, but the Oregon injuries at that position were the best thing to ever happen to Malik Benson, because without him, I don't know if he gets on the field much. But this is the beauty of football, is when the opportunity horse comes riding by, either sit your ass down or, it doesn't come back very often. And it came for him, and he sat on it and made the most of it. And he will be a guy that will get his name called on. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's a little higher than people think. I don't think he'll be there in the 6th round.
Yeah,
I think he goes before the 6th round. And going into the season, he was probably an undrafted free agent. I think he gets himself drafted in somewhere in that 5th round.
Yeah, I think so too. Isaiah,
especially if he goes. I mean, there's some whispers that he may run in the 4.3s. I don't know, but like there's
that is such a dagger for me. I have such a hard time with that. That's the projection. That guy, the late bloomer, super speedy, undersized, special teams guy.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, if he's just a return man for you, but he's a good return man for you from day one, and he's a 4th or 5th receiver, that's value in the in the 5th round. That's good value.
Yep.
So then I go, well, I don't love the guy because he was a late bloomer. Well, all he has to be is a good return man and a 5th receiver. Can he be that? Yeah, I think he can. Yeah. So we'll see. Isaiah World, I never bought into this. I never was in on this.
I did at the beginning. I know you didn't. The hype coming in, I was kind of like, hey man, let's see where this goes. He was the number 1 portal tackle, and it never worked for me.
Too many penalties, a lot of holding penalties, a lot of false starts. And what I've always said is, if you're slow-footed on the edge and you're worried about getting beat or someone going around you, you don't jump because of the whistle. You don't jump because of the crowd. Sometimes you jump because the guy opposite you put the fear of God in you. And it looked like his false starts came in when he was in the Mountain West at Nevada, came against quicker Mountain West edges. And that set off real warning signs for me because it gets harder in the Big Ten, turns out. So he struggled with speed on the edge badly. Some of the tape is bad. I forget who it was, whether it was Dane Brugler or Daniel Jeremiah. By the way, if you don't follow those guys, they're both aces. Midway through the year, I think it was Brugler, said first round body, day one body, day 3 tape. And now he's got a torn ACL, and I do feel for him in that. What a terrible time to tear your ACL. He apparently tore his ACL in the national semifinal game against
Indiana. It was a non-contact injury too. And look, I'm not trying to same thing, heartbreaking. But you mentioned kind of the feet. He tore it on a spin move where he got beat and kind of was stumbling around, and it's
like tearing your ACL while getting your ankles broke. What happened.
Yeah, that's what happened. And so it's a really big, not only is it just tragic that he tore it, but yeah, that's the equivalent of Steph Curry putting you in a spin move, and then as you're stumbling, you tear your ACL. It's not good.
Talanoa Hufanga did this as a Niner safety. He tried to make a tackle on a running back, and he juked him so bad he stumbled and tore his ACL. This is the offensive line equivalent of that. I don't know if he gets drafted. Maybe you take a 7th round flyer on him because you want to own his rights.
Because he's a huge body.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it's going to work. He needs to be moved to guard. Yes. It's not even the debate. It's not a discussion. No. He cannot hold up at tackle in the NFL. And spare me the left tackle, right tackle thing, because the gap ain't what it used to be. He is a guard, and Alex Harkey is an undraftable guard. Yeah. So I thought the Ducks, I think Poncho's a guard. I think the Ducks played with 5 good college guards last year. Yeah. And when you went up against real dudes with real edges, those good guards that you put on the edge in Harkey and World couldn't hold up to the speed. And that's the difference between a tackle and a guard. So World, if he were healthy, I would have said 5th, 6th, 7th rounder, you take a flyer, you move him to right guard. As is, he's injured. I mean, torn ACL with a bad season is really rough. Bryce Betcher is the last one I have on my list. I went back and watched some Bryce Betcher stuff because he does everything at like a B+ level. Yeah. The problem is those grades all drop a whole grade when you go to the NFL because it gets that much tougher. I was surprised rewatching what he is. I thought he was much more athletic. He's a really good athlete, and he might test well at the combine. His processing is not good. He doesn't see that. He plays like a guy who hasn't played a lot of reps in football, which is weird because I think he's really smart. I think he's a good player. His reaction time is late. He comes downhill a lot. He bites on play action. He's fine. He's more Noah Sewell than I thought he was, which is really weird because I thought Noah Sewell's like a goal line, 3rd and short package only linebacker coming out in terms of the profile because he was so limited in space. Bryce Betcher, in part because of his reaction, his lack of ability to diagnose, plays slower than he is. And that's going to hurt him. I think he's a day 3 guy. I think he's going to test well. But again, it just doesn't show up on tape at all. He is much slower on film than he should be. I don't know what that is. I don't know if you can diagnose that better than I can. That's as far as I can get, where I don't know if it's processing. I don't know if he's late reaction. I don't know what the deal is, but he's a half a step slower than he should be based on the athlete he is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he is because he's not a big guy.
He's undersized, downhill only linebacker. That's a problem.
It's a problem. I think there's a place for him because I do think he's a sure tackler. He's a willing tackler. He's a physical guy. He brings some thump to him. But I don't think he can be a 3-down linebacker. I think he needs to go to a place, and he's not the same sort of. This is kind of a wonky comparison, but Ernest Jones was a really good player for the Rams and the Titans, and they both let him go because he couldn't be a 3-down linebacker, and he was an interior guy that just needed to make tackles. Yep. And Seattle was like, okay, well, we can do this, and you don't have to be. We don't need to play you in space. Here, we're going to play you in the box, get downhill, hit someone, right? Sure tackler. And I think at times that's kind of where I view this as kind of maybe a poor man's Ernest Jones. I don't think he can be a 3-down linebacker. Again, I'll be interested to see what he runs. is that there's times when I watch him, when I've watched him play at Oregon, when I'm really impressed and he is running around making plays. And there's other times where I feel like he's kind of slow-footed and he doesn't look like the greatest athlete in the world. And so I'm just kind of interested. He's a super tweener. Like I said, he's not big, but he's not like Shaq Thompson was a guy that wasn't a big linebacker, but Shaq Thompson was an elite athlete. When you watch Shaq Thompson run, you were like, okay, this makes sense. And Shaq Thompson played on the outside in the NFL. Bryce Betcher cannot play on the outside. He needs to play in the box. And when you get against NFL offensive linemen, remember, what did I say I want my NFL offensive lineman to be? I want him to be 330. I want these big movers. And is he physical enough to shed those blockers? Because there are times at Oregon where I thought he got swallowed up playing inside. So there's some questions there. He's and by the way we're talking about him, this is the way we talk about every fourth, fifth round pick.
Yeah, Bryce Betcher was an awesome college linebacker. Awesome college linebacker. This is draft talk. This is not what we think of him as a college football player. It's really important to understand that.
So there is a place, there is a place in the NFL for Bryce Betcher. I believe that. Noah Sewell's still playing in this league, by the way. I mean, you mentioned Noah Sewell. Yeah. Noah Sewell's still a linebacker and plays, and he's one of those guys that's probably he's probably your 10th best defender on a starting 11, and he's not a full-time starter and has been in the NFL, but there's a place for him. And I kind of feel like that's the way Bryce Betcher is going to be. And that's one of those that we'll see. And maybe he can defy the odds. Who was the Chris Borland was a guy at Wisconsin, and he had to retire from concussions
after 1 year.
After 1 year. But Chris Borland was a guy that ended up being a really productive player for that 1 year. And like I hate that because now I'm just comparing somewhat white linebackers that were a little bit of the smaller size. Who UW had a guy a couple years ago that was like this, that was an interior guy that was a tackling machine. Whose name escapes me, and he ended up in Seattle, and it kind of it didn't work out. But this is he will be a marginal. He'll be that guy fighting for a spot in the NFL, and a lot of this will be what kind of an athlete is he? How big can he be versus the athlete he can be? Because if he's 225 pounds, I don't think the athletic score better be a lot higher than what we think it's going to be.
Right.
And if he can bulk up and be 235, 240 pounds, does that sap already some of the athleticism? So we'll see. But he's a great story. He's a great kid. He loves football. He hits, he competes, got good down at the Senior Bowl, right? Pretty high praise for him. Coaches liked him. He's a guy that coaches will love because he sticks his nose in there, and it'll be physical. And a lot of this will be about fit. I'll bet you his position on draft boards, they're going to be all over the place.
Yep.
There'll be some NFL teams look at him and be like, dude, get out of here. And there'll be others that'll end up really liking him. But there's a place for Bryce Betcher in the NFL. I believe that.
So I just did the negative side of it. What if positive side? So what if he does test out as a pretty good athlete? Again, the tape doesn't match. I'm not arguing with people about that. It doesn't. He doesn't always look like you said it. He's slow-footed. He looks slow-footed at times. We know he's not. He's a good athlete. He's a center fielder for a really good baseball team.
Yeah.
So what if he just isn't that experienced in advanced football because he was a walk-on?
Yeah.
And what if you go in the NFL and he kind of special teams it because he's willing. He's a high character guy. So you take a flyer on him. He's your special teamer that flies down the football field. And as he gets more experience with football, that athleticism starts to shine because he starts to trust himself a little bit and ends up being a late bloomer, pretty good linebacker. Now you have to believe in that, but a team might hang on to him if he's a special teams asset. And I do think he will be because he's a high character backup linebacker. And if we were drafting positions that have the worst character, linebacker would be really high on the board. So if you can just take a guy and say, he's going to be a special teamer for us, he's not going to get in trouble, he's a plus in the locker room, he's a hard worker, and let's just hope he doesn't have the most exposure in football and that his instincts will elevate as we give him more. And let's give him little bits and spoon feed him. Yeah. He could end up, maybe it's his third team, he could end up being a decent inside backer, but it might take that path, which is funny because the two guys we mentioned were Noah Sewell, who is that kind of figured it out enough to play high character guy. And Ernest Jones bounced around a bunch, finally found a fit. I think we're saying kind of the same thing about where we see him.
The one thing I'll say about Betcher is I won't bet against him because that kid just competes.
Me either.
And that's like, at the end of the day, did you love this game or not? And when you love it and you're willing to really put it out there, like there's something to that. Because when you are gonna be a mid-round pick, how much do you love this? How much are you willing to bounce around? How many hurdles are you willing to overcome? And the one thing you will not question about Bryce Betcher is that kid is his toughness or his ability to defy the odds. So that's why I said there's a place for Bryce Betcher. If my team if I have a team and they end up drafting Bryce Betcher in the, I don't know, even in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, wherever he ends up going, because I think he could be all over the board, I would not be upset about it at all. That's a guy ideally I would love to have in my locker room and I would love to have in my on the field. I'm a fan of Bryce Betcher and I'm rooting for him. But this is for a kid that athletically kind of defied the odds in college. It becomes that much harder to defy the odds in the NFL because now you're running around with the true great whites and the killer whales of the world. And, ultimately, is there enough athleticism there in size? So we'll see. But I'm a Bryce Betcher fan.
Yeah, me too. Linebacker is the toughest position to project. It's just tough. You have to be an off the charts dude or you struggle. That's why there's like 4 good ones in the entire NFL right now.
Hardest position and worst position in football.
Pivoting away from the Ducks because there's other guys. I mean, Alex Harkey. It's just not worth. I mean, I hope it works out for him playing in Europe or Canada. Like he's not an NFL guy. A couple of receivers that I really like on the West Coast. In fact, both of them I would be doing backflips if the Niners need a receiver with Brandon Ayuk quitting on the team. I'd be thrilled. And I hate framing it this way, but if either of these dudes last to the late first round, something's wrong. It's USC's Makai Lemon and Washington's Denzel Boston. I think the narrative is course corrected now on Lemon. He was like this guy's pretty good. And coming out of high school, for people who don't know, he was at Los Alamitos with Malachi Nelson, who was potentially the number 1 recruit in the nation. And they also got Zachariah Branch out of Bishop Gorman. And everybody thought Zachariah Branch was the top player, the top pass catcher they were getting. They were getting 2 really good ones. But, the class was all about Nelson and Branch. And I told Connor Morissette, who now covers USC, and he felt the same way. Makai Lemon's the best of the 3. Branch is great. He's electric, but he's not consistent. And Nelson's great because he's got Lemon. The tools aren't totally there. It's not all there for Lemon, but for Nelson, but Makai Lemon is a superstar. I've been wrong before. That was one I hit home on. I think Makai Lemon is a superstar. I think he's got Amon-Ra St. Brown potential. They go to the same school. He's a similar guy. Sometimes Amon-Ra is a one of one in the sense that he's not the biggest receiver, but seems to always just find himself open and he's not a 4-3 guy. Those are rare. Color me as a guy who thinks Makai Lemon can be that kind of dude. And then for a long time, the conversation about who would be the number 1 receiver in this draft, at least in September, October, it was either Boston or Lemon. Mm-hmm. Denzel Boston is a 6'4", 210-pound pass catcher out of Washington, gets banged up late in the year. And so we forget about him. And now there's talk about him being a late first, and he's not one of the top 3 receivers in this draft because there's Jordyn Tyson from Arizona State. There's Carnell Tate from Ohio State. And if Denzel Boston continues to slide down the board and really is a late first rounder, I think he's every bit as good as those other 3. And I don't get why he's not in that discussion. I really don't. I'm baffled by it because he might run a legit, even if he runs a 4.5 flat at 6'4", 210, that's a monster because we've seen his ability to go up and get the football, and he's a complete receiver. He runs underneath stuff too. I love Denzel Boston. I love Makai Lemon. Yeah,
this is a really good receiver class. Again, is there the Marvin Harrison Jr., who, by the way, hasn't turned out to be what people thought he was, but, it's like, oh, he's he can't miss prospect. And we see this, but it's just every year there is not a more loaded position in the NFL draft. There's not a more loaded position in the NFL than a receiver. There's just they're coming in waves and you can find them and you can find them late in the draft. I feel like I'm not going to say that receivers are becoming disposable, but God, you can find them. You can. And there's more that come every single year. Is there another position that every year you look up and be like, who the hell is this guy? Oh, geez, this guy has 75 catches and by the way, like for Makai Lemon, just he should go thank Amon-Ra St. Brown, because Amon-Ra St. Brown walked so that Makai Lemon can run.
No, it's true.
Right. I mean, just that and he's proven that you can be that number one receiver with that kind of body. And Carnell Tate, just another in the line. And I'm with you. I really like Denzel Boston. He is, and I think he kind of fell. He kind of fell by the wayside a little bit because of Washington. That look, in any of their good games, their quarterback, whatever. Well, that's a topic for another time. But my God, you want to talk about a guy that disappeared in any sort of meaningful game that they had? It's unbelievable. Like the production, and that's not Denzel Boston's fault. And he did battle some injuries, but there's another guy that was tough. I'm trying to remember the game, but he kept getting. I think he kept getting knocked around, like had a hamstring thing and some cramps, and he kept coming back into the game. And that dude's just willing to compete. There's some really, really good receivers. We didn't mention Jordyn Tyson from out at Arizona State, who's another guy that again had battled some injuries. But there, you want to talk about a guy that pops on and gives you like the holy shit, like. If you want to say upside and you're saying, okay, who could be the best receiver in this draft? It might be him.
Yeah.
And it's fun that a lot of these guys are on the West Coast. Yeah. So it's a really good receiving group. I really like this a lot. I like it in the first and second round. I think there's some guys that are going to go. I know there's a kid out of USC that you really like that's probably going to go somewhere in the third round.
Yeah, Jacoby Lane's a
Jacoby
really
Lane
too. Yeah, and that's what's scary is I've seen Jacoby Lane run. He's fast. I mean, he's legit fast. He was at an Oregon camp, and he was like the guy they were looking at, and they put a stopwatch on him, and he ran the 40, and it was like one of those things that if he ran sub 4.55, they were going to offer because out of high school he was 6'4", 175, and I think he broke 4.5 on a hand time, and literally. Before he jogged all the way back to the starting line, they pulled him aside and offered him a scholarship.
Yeah.
And it seemed like he was going to go to Oregon because Oregon was the first offer. He'd always dreamed of going to USC. That Oregon offer led to USC diving in. If a dude goes to your camp and within like 20 minutes announces he's got a scholarship offer, other schools are going to be like, what did they see? So he gets invited to USC, similar thing. USC offers. He always wanted to go there. Jacoby Lane might be better than people are giving him credit for. He might be a sleeper. I am starting to realize as we go through this that Emmanuel McNeil Warren from Toledo early on and Denzel Boston might be my dudes.
Yeah.
Because I had him as the Niner pick at 27 like a month ago, and now everybody's saying he's a top 15 pick. So maybe I can't go that direction, but I did like him early. And then I think Denzel Boston has a chance to be really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Would it shock you if Jordyn Tyson has some injuries? Because of that, he kind of gets derailed off and on because he was banged up throughout college. Denzel Boston is healthy, and Denzel Boston is a wide receiver one in the NFL. Would that shock you at 6'4", 210?
No, not at all.
We don't talk about him the same way we talk about Lemon, Tate, and Tyson, and I think he belongs right there. And I don't know what the separator is between him and those other guys. I don't. If Boston runs a good 40, I'm in. I'm all in. Yeah. I want Denzel Boston on the 49ers. I want him on any high-powered offense because he's a dude.
And he doesn't even have to, like, you look at some of the comps to him, right? Like Michael Pittman, if you even want to do like someone like that, he doesn't have to, at that size, he doesn't necessarily, and he's not Mike Evans big, but he doesn't necessarily have to be, you mentioned earlier, like depending on your size, right? You're 40. Like if he's a guy that runs in the 4.5s, like low 4.5s, okay.
Yeah, if he's a 4 or 5 flat, that's blazing.
Yeah, you want to go 4 or 5 at 6'4", 210, 215 pounds, cool. And that's a nasty guy that will go up and compete for the ball.
Yes.
So I'm with you. Like I really think that you can make an argument like in a couple years who's going to end up being number one. If you told me Tate, Tyson, Lemon, Boston, and you said any one of those guys would end up being the best receiver in this class, that wouldn't shock you. Like I'm not betting against Ohio State receivers, and Carnell Tate's a guy that he doesn't have the hype coming out that some of those other wide receivers have had coming out of Ohio State. And so I don't know if he ends up being the best, but he's just a solid guy. But I think maybe the high end stuff, maybe I would lean a little bit more towards one of those three. And then you get down into the draft, like we'll get into this later, but like I really like Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama, and he kind of is one of those Jacoby Lane guys. Like I think there's going to be some guys in that third and fourth round that just are good. They just end up being good players. We haven't mentioned either one of the Indiana receivers. It's a real
Cooper's a good football.
Yeah. And it started out as Surratt kind of being the guy, and then it ended up, Cooper ended up being the best one on that. So I just think this is a very deep receiver class. And from a local standpoint, yes, there's 3 guys on the West Coast with Tyson, Lemon, and Boston that will probably all go in the first round and should be day one players in the NFL.
Lance Zierlein gave a comp for Boston. Did you see it?
No, what did he say?
Puka Nacua. That is so bold. That's so bold.
Well, Puka's a different boy. We can do a whole thing on.
Yeah,
Puka.
We don't have to.
Yeah, because he was, Anyway, Puka. I mean, half of Puka's problems is he just couldn't stay healthy. And he's.
I know his other problem, but we don't.
He's an interesting.
A different cat.
He's a different cat, but. I mean, most of his stuff, why he fell was just an injury concern. But yeah, Puka's he's a hell of a player. He's a hell of a player. That's a great comp. I mean, someone comparing you to Puka Nacua, who's one of the 2 or 3 best receivers in the NFL, that's not a bad thing right now for Boston. Who, by the way, Puka Nacua started out at UW, so there's another one.
Very, very quickly, and then we'll get out because we'll do a deeper dive on it. But we talked a lot about this draft. We talked about edge. We touched on a little bit of everything. We didn't talk about the guy at the number 1 spot. Yeah. And 2 minutes and we'll wrap. But I wanted to get your thoughts on Mendoza as a quarterback prospect, because I do think there are 2 different kinds of quarterbacks. And I don't even mean like dual threat versus pocket. Yeah. I think there's 2 different kinds in the NFL now where it's elite tools and elite processing. And I think he's pretty clearly one and not the other. And I'm curious what you think of him as a player. If you were the Raiders, would you take him 1? Do you feel good about him as a prospect? What do you see from him?
So this is one too, that as we go on, I would like to get a better look at Fernando Mendoza. So let's start with let's say this. Everything I've read and having watched him play, and again, I've watched him through the lens of I just have seen Indiana. I saw him a little bit when he was at Cal too, right? He's a guy that is a 1-year wonder. He was good at Cal. No one thought of him as anything special. He goes to Indiana, and people were wondering, is he an upgrade over O'Rourke, who was the quarterback there? I thought early on at Indiana, looked a little wonky. In fact, I think I saw Dan Orlovsky say something about his first 4 or 5 games at Indiana weren't what he was expecting. And I don't think that was not what we're expecting. I think he got better as it went along. Remember some of those early games. Remember we were going into that Oregon game. I told you Indiana hadn't necessarily lit the world on fire. They had an early one against Cornell or something where it wasn't, particularly, pretty. They struggled a little bit. So I think as the season went on, it got better. Super smart kid, willing athlete, is willing to kind of tuck it and run. Big enough arm. I think he is. Again, in a lot of drafts, he's not the number 1 overall pick, and he's not the number 1 quarterback taken. I thought it was absurd when Mel Kiper, I really did. I thought it was malpractice. Mel Kiper said, "You don't pass on a surefire NFL star." And I was like, "Oh my God, really? Surefire NFL star with Fernando Mendoza? Please stop." But he has played a lot of football, not necessarily a lot of high level football. Ice water in the veins when they needed him most. I thought he was absolutely clutch, whether that was Oregon, whether that was Penn State, whether that was in the national title game. Tough physical kid, super smart, good processing. Didn't necessarily play in an NFL offense, played in a lot of RPO stuff that Indiana does. Can he play under center? Can he make that transition? He has a good enough arm, but it's not necessarily an elite arm, but he has great anticipation with where he throws the ball. So I think with him, should he be the number 1 overall pick? Maybe, because he's simply a quarterback. Is he the best player in this draft? No. If he goes to a place that has no infrastructure around him, Raiders, with shitty O-line play, I would be scared to death. I think he is a guy that could get ruined or a guy that could thrive based on where he goes.
Yeah.
I think this has a real Sam Darnold, Mac Jones sort of thing. Mac Jones went to a nice situation and had a really nice rookie year. Sam Darnold went to a shit show, and never recovered. And I get Mac had his own struggles and now is kind of having to go through that. I just think he's going to be a guy that there's enough there that you can like. There's enough there that you can say you can see a franchise quarterback. Maybe Bo Nix is another one. Bo Nix has had a really nice run here in Denver because he ended up in Denver. Plain and simple. Had Bo Nix played with the Raiders last year, Bo Nix is probably not a starting quarterback in 2027.
Sure.
But he didn't play for the Raiders. Or if he played for the Cardinals, right? Yeah. But he didn't. He played with Sean Payton, and he had a good run game, and he had elite defense. And even with all that, I kind of think that Sean Payton thinks that Bo Nix isn't that great. I think that whole weird thing, I think Sean Payton thinks that Bo Nix is a tool that he can use.
A product of him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Fernando Mendoza is more that than he is elevator. I don't think he goes to a team and just rate the rising tide lifts all boats. I don't think he's that. And that's what would scare me is Oakland. Now they are bringing in a very bright offensive mind in Kubiak, who did a nice job in New Orleans and did a great job in Seattle and did a great job with Sam Darnold. But again, Sam Darnold is not a riser of boats. Sam Darnold is a product of what's around him. If you put it, Geno Smith left the Seahawks to go to the Raiders and Sam Darnold came in. I'm not saying that Seattle wins a Super Bowl with Geno Smith. I have no idea, but Sam Darnold and Geno Smith are a lot closer to each other than Sam Darnold is to, I don't know. Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen
or Lamar Jackson
So if Geno Smith is in Seattle last year, I don't know if they win the Super Bowl, but they're a playoff team and they're a contender. If Sam Darnold played in Vegas last year, Sam Darnold is Geno Smith, and it's probably not a starting quarterback in 2027. Right. So that's the scary part about Mendoza is that when you go one overall, you tend to go to crappy teams with bad infrastructure, and the Raiders have a bad O-line. They got rid of their best their best receiver and they shipped him out of town. Down to Jacksonville.
You do have Myers, who opened things up for Jacksonville completely.
You have Brock Bowers and you got Genty, but Genty didn't do much because you can't run behind that crappy old line. And you had your best offensive lineman that you benched at one point and was playing out of position. So I don't know if he goes to the Raiders. So much of that is going to be what they build around him. And can Kubiak just kind of be patient? So that's kind of my 35,000 foot view. Should they draft him? I don't know. There's not another quarterback that you would draft ahead of him. I'm not drafting Ty Simpson ahead of him. He's by far the best quarterback prospect. But when I have so many needs, I'll say this. If I'm the Raiders and someone wants to give me 2 1s or a 1, a 2, and a 3 to move back 10 spots, sure, cool. I'm perfectly fine with that.
We've seen that moving down 10 spots from 1 to say even 8, 9 range, that would be worth 2, maybe 3 first-round picks, especially if it's a quarterback. I think the longer I'm in this, and I know it's hard to sell to your owner, it's hard to sell to your fan base because you're admitting you're not ready.
Yeah.
I think the worst thing you can do is not be ready to put a quarterback in position to succeed.
Yeah.
Throw him to the wolves and then be like, well, and now every piece we get is based on trying to bolster this thing because now we've got our guy. So our timeline is now. We've begun our timeline because we took the guy. That's really risky. And I think if you're really, really far away, if you have a terrible secondary, if your offensive line regressed mightily last year from 20th, 22nd in the league to dead last or second to last in the league, they did have the worst offensive line coach. It was a Nepo hire.
Yep.
And
Pete Carroll's kid.
It will get better because it can't get worse than Pete Carroll's kid. He's an abomination of an offensive line coach. Everywhere he's been, his O-lines get worse everywhere. So he's just not a good coach. So they will get better along the offensive line. They will, whether they add anything or not. And I get it. You got Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty. And if you had competent quarterback play, you can squint and say, we've got the 3 pieces of a good offense. The problem is none of the other pieces are ready. In fact, you traded away your safety valve good receiver months before. You now take the quarterback who desperately could use a sure-handed good receiver to help ease his transition. You traded him away to Jacksonville. You've admitted you're not ready. And I think if I could move down and everyone says if you can get the quarterback, you have to do it. I don't agree with that. I think if you don't have the infrastructure for the quarterback, and I don't mean a playoff team, but you have to have a solid O-line, you have to have a weapon or two for them. If you don't have that, you're wasting a pick in some regard, because guys fail all the time going to a bad place with a bad infrastructure, and they just go underwater and they can't get over it. Mendoza's a good quarterback. He processes well. His tools are not elite, and we have completely changed because he won the Heisman and Indiana was the way they were. We have completely changed the narrative on what he was last season. These are his stats from last season. This is really important because I think the average fan has no idea. It's Heisman winner. He was phenomenal. Yeah. 233, 2 touchdowns, and interception against Iowa. Oregon, 215, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Michigan State was terrible, 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. UCLA, 168 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Maryland, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 201 yards. Penn State, 218 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. We've got 2 TDs, 1 pick, 1 pick, 1 pick, 1 pick, 1 pick, 1 pick, 1 pick. 4 in 6 games where he threw 4 picks and had 5 touchdowns against not great competition. Oregon, good, yes. Iowa, fine. Maryland and UCLA, not so much. So even against teams that weren't very good, he wasn't elite all year. He wasn't. It's just that's an inaccurate description of how he played. In the middle of the year, he was pedestrian. Yeah. So I worry about it. I think he can process. I think if you put him, I think he's a lot like in terms of tools, not what he's going to be, but in terms of his tools, he's a lot like Brock Purdy. Doesn't have the biggest arm, throws an accurate ball. It's a very catchable ball, puts it where it needs to be, processes well, but there's no sexy tool in that handbag. So he's got in his toolbox. So he's got to have the pieces right. And I don't know if the Raiders have the pieces right. I agree with you. That's probably it. It's 11 o'clock. We should probably get going. That's about as long as we ever go. Yeah. Look what happened. We went draft prospect and it went crazy long. Yeah. Can you believe it? We will tighten things up when it comes to the NFL draft going forward. This was a very deep dive on some West Coast guys, and we won't traditionally do an hour and a half on like 7 players. Yeah. We'll get to Oregon State next pod because we were asked about that. And then we'll get into some general feelings on first rounders, where the strengths are, and maybe even specific teams. A couple of teams on the West Coast, maybe what should they be targeting? We already mentioned Pregnon to the Chargers would be a godsend. What should the Seahawks be looking at? What should the Niners be looking at? What could the Raiders do? All of that and more on next week's pod. Suke, thank you for your time. Please like, subscribe, leave comments, ask us questions, etc. And we'll see you soon.